So, let me get this straight. You lit the match, watched the chaos bloom, and when the smoke finally cleared, everyone was pointing fingers, screaming justice, demanding answers. And you just smirked. Not a word, not a flicker of remorse. Just a quiet little exit like it was all some kind of game. And maybe it was. Maybe it still is. You see, they think you lost control, that something snapped, that deep inside, you were just another broken toy who finally ran out of battery. But we both know better, don't we? There was no snap, no scream, no meltdown. What you did, that was art. Controlled, deliberate, exquisite. Every move a masterpiece, every silence a scream. And when they finally caught you, dragged you out like some cornered animal, they expected fear. They expected guilt. What they got was a grin. That little twitch in the corner of your mouth that said, "I've already won." And you had, hadn't you? Because even in chains, you weren't their prisoner. They were yours. Oh, the way the cameras loved you. The flashbulbs, the headlines, the late-night specials. They all danced to your tune without even knowing it. They thought they were covering a criminal. What they were really doing was amplifying a signal. Your signal. Broadcasting chaos, feeding the myth. And the best part? You didn't need to lift a finger. You just existed. And the world started to crack around you. Because people like you, you're not here to be understood. You're here to remind the rest of them just how paper-thin their rules really are. And in the end, when the show reached its peak, who smiled? The judge. Who sweated? The police. And who walked out? You. They called it a trial. A trial. As if dragging you into a marble box with powdered wigs and wooden hammers could somehow tame the storm. As if truth still mattered in a room built on performance. But you knew what it was from the beginning. Theater. A circus. And you? You weren't the accused. You were the star. The prosecution came in loaded. Oh, they had charts, graphs, blood samples, a timeline, motive, method, and more than enough witnesses to drown a lesser soul. But you weren't there to fight. You were there to watch them unravel. Because when a person doesn't defend themselves, people panic. And when people panic, they make mistakes. You didn't say much. A shrug here, a smirk there, a few words, carefully chosen, strategically placed like bombs under the floorboards. The jury? They wanted answers. The media wanted spectacle. But the judge saw something else. He didn't see a defendant. He saw an anomaly, a system breaker, a glitch in the simulation. You could feel it, couldn't you? The slow decay of logic in that courtroom. Order giving way to discomfort. Procedure crumbling under silence. Because what can law do when faced with someone who simply does not care? You weren't trying to win. You were trying to corrupt. And it worked. By the second week, the headlines weren't about your guilt. They were about your smile, your stillness, your refusal to flinch. And in that vacuum of noise, you became legend. Some said you were broken, others said brilliant. But they all agreed on one thing. You were dangerous. So when the judge leaned forward and smiled, that wasn't mercy. That was recognition. He saw you for what you were, not a mistake, but a message. And when he dropped that gavel, the game was yours. And the police? Oh, they sweated. Not because they were unsure. Not because the evidence was shaky. No, they sweated because they knew they had you. They had the reports, the photos, the timestamps, witnesses who cried on cue, forensics that sang like a choir. They had everything except control. You weren't nervous. You weren't begging. You weren't even interested. And that's what broke them. You see, the badge only works when the accused plays along, when guilt wears a leash and shame follows orders. But you flipped the whole script. You didn't break the rules. You ignored them entirely. They put you in that cold metal chair thinking it would make you human. They thought the cuffs would shrink you down to size. But the only thing they did was give you a stage, and you used every second. You didn't have to speak. Your silence was loud enough to make the walls sweat. Every time the detectives leaned in with that smug little smirk, You met them with eyes that said, "You're already too late." And you were right. Because while they followed protocols, you followed patterns. While they hunted answers, you planted confusion. You didn't escape the system, you infected it. And by the time they realized what you were doing, it was too late. They weren't investigating you. They were performing for you. Even the cameras turned on them, zoomed in on every twitch, every sigh, the sweat on their temples, televised for the world to see. You took the people who lived by certainty, by order, and made them doubt everything. Every step they took, they wondered, is this what you wanted? And the answer was always yes. Because the moment they caught you, you already won. The day of the verdict. The end of the road, they thought. The moment justice would finally land its punch. Reporters packed the hall like flies to a carcass. Protesters outside with signs they barely understood. Officers stood still, like statues trying to fake courage. And you? You wore white. Crisp. Clean. Ironic. A color that screamed innocence while your eyes whispered murder. You didn't even blink when the judge walked in. You didn't stand out of respect, because what's respect to a person who doesn't believe in the game? You sat like royalty on a borrowed throne, waiting to see who would blink first. And when the jury shuffled in, eyes red, hands shaking, it wasn't guilt they were drowning in. It was fear. Because they knew what they were about to say. They knew the world would call it a mistake. They knew the headlines would scream corruption, incompetence, madness. But they said it anyway. Not guilty. 2 words. Sharp enough to cut through every badge in the building. Gasps. Screams. Papers fell. Phones lit up. But you stood slowly, brushed a wrinkle from your sleeve, nodded once, like you were leaving a dinner party, not a courtroom. Because it was never about proving your innocence. It was about proving that innocence doesn't matter when fear takes over. And the judge, oh, the judge, he didn't slam the gavel in frustration. He didn't glare. He smiled, a soft, subtle smile. Because in you, he saw something terrifying and familiar. Not guilt, not evil, but freedom. The kind of freedom that eats laws for breakfast. And as you stepped out of that courtroom, the echo of that verdict still ringing behind you, the world tilted just a little. Because something had changed. You weren't just free, you were untouchable. Now the city doesn't sleep the same way. Doors are locked a little tighter. Parents whisper at dinner. The lights in courtrooms flicker more often. Because somewhere out there, you're still walking, still breathing, still thinking. And that terrifies them. Not because they believe you'll strike again, but because they know you don't have to. Your existence is enough. You bent the system without touching it. You didn't need a gun, a gang, or a manifesto. You just needed silence, a little time, and a reason. You became an idea. And ideas are dangerous things. They put your face on the news, painted you in every shade of madness. Some called you a genius, some called you the devil. But the smart ones, the ones who really paid attention, didn't call you anything. They just watched and waited. Because monsters, real monsters, don't roar. They grin, they wear suits, sit in courtrooms, walk through metal detectors like everyone else. And when the alarms go off, it's already too late. And now, somewhere, someone else is watching your tapes, studying your words, copying your silence. Because once a system cracks, it never really heals. It just learns to hide the damage. You were never the climax. You were the blueprint, the start of something worse. So when the judge smiled, and the police sweated, and you walked out that door, it wasn't the end. It was the opening act. And the next time someone hears footsteps in the dark, the next time a courtroom holds its breath, the question won't be who did it. It'll be, how many more like you are out there, smiling?